Hello, it's me again. I thought I'd upload another walkthrough for my stream, and this time we'll talk through it. So I sped it up to just under 30 minutes. This is a 2-hour study that I did on my Study Buddies channel over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Paul Scott Canavan. I'll chuck a link down below if you want to join in, because it's kind of the point. And for this session, I chose cast studies, so studying a bust, a clay sculpture or a stone sculpture or something like that, so that people can work on their portraiture a bit and their grasp of lighting. Hard surface stuff like this is actually really useful for studying. Studying busts in general is just like really good practice. And something I try and do a lot with Study Buddies is mix up the subjects that we study. Sometimes we do landscape photography, even sometimes like Google Maps stuff where we just kind of jump around to random locations and see what happens. But for this one, I thought it'd be fun to do a kind of classic art school slash atelier exercise here in the cast study. So like typically in an art school, this would be done over days or weeks potentially, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. But for the purposes of doing a stream, the studies are always 2 hours long, and what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to return to this study on Friday and spend another 2 hours on it. I'm trying to teach the people who are in the stream, or to show them, I suppose, that spending a long time on a piece like this is a really good way to practice your rendering and to learn how to finish a piece of art. It tends to be something people are really bad at, myself included, for a long time. So anyway, let's talk about what we're doing here. So I've set up my canvas to be the same proportions as my reference. Normally I try and cut as much of myself out of these videos, but occasionally I miss one. And I just did a rough pencil sketch, and here I'm showing that my measurements were kind of off, and that's something I'll quite often do, especially on stream, is if I'm doing a block in, like a pencil, I say pencil, it's digital, we're working digitally here. If I do a sort of pencil, if I do a sketch, usually when I'm sort of nearing the end of the sketch, which is usually like 15 minutes or so in, I'll bring up the reference photo just to show, for myself actually, it's useful to check how accurate it is, but also just to show the class that I suck sometimes. I think that's important. That's one of the fun things about doing Study Buddies, even though I'm hosting the stream, and people might come and see the stream because they like some of the stuff I've worked on. It's a good way to show that I still suck at loads of stuff, and that's why, studying is important. So yeah, my approach for this early stage really has just been, taking my time measuring by eye as much as I can to try and get the proportions right, and then adjusting stuff as I go along. And usually, I actually don't always work this way. In fact, for a lot of my studies, I don't sketch at all. I prefer to jump straight into color. But I think, again, it's useful to show different processes sometimes. And I think the classic do a rough sketch, clean it up, then start working with color approach is probably the best way to teach people who are a bit newer to the process. Not that my Study Buddies class is new. Most of the people who are in there are, relatively experienced at this point. But occasionally we do get brand new people, and it's good to kind of show the fundamentals a bit. So with that out of the way, I've started blocking in the colors. I took a weird approach with this one, and this is something I talk about a lot on the stream, that I kind of vary my approach kind of randomly when I start a new study. I don't like to just do the same thing. I don't have one set workflow. I don't come in and do my lines, my flats, my shadows or whatever. I just don't find that very useful. And I also think it's just fun to mess around. So I think initially when I was blocking this in, my plan was to block in the light values first, then paint the shadows on a separate layer above that. Not sure why, to be honest. but I guess I decided that would be fun. And then midway through, I got bored of it. Because a thing about my approach generally is that I usually work on 1 or 2 layers max. I come from a traditional painting background, so I find it more comfortable and more enjoyable actually to work on a single layer and just to kind of overpaint stuff. If I make a mistake, just paint over it, you know? I like that approach. So here we are starting to bring in some of these shadows. I'm just eyeballing the colors for the most part. Occasionally I will use the color picker just to check how close I am. And also occasionally I'll do it as a reflex because I do it a lot when I'm painting for clients. You know, I'll obviously be sampling my references or whatever. So I have to teach myself not to do it when I'm streaming. But it is helpful for me, especially as someone, I'm quite colorblind, so it's helpful for me to just double check values. Values I'm pretty good at, but usually double checking colors can be helpful for me sometimes. But really the process here is just starting to block everything in, varying the saturation and the hue of the strokes as much as I can at this stage, because I want to build quite a diverse palette of colors, I guess you could say. Even though, it's stone, shiny stone, I don't know, clay, whatever the fuck it is. So technically it's got, a fairly similar colors throughout. It produces a more interesting image when you sort of bring in those nice saturated oranges, for example, in the hair, and bring in a little bit more grey into the shadows and maybe exaggerating that a little bit. You'll also notice that I'm working zoomed out right now, and that is something I always do when I paint. I try not to zoom in onto the piece at all until everything's blocked out and it's already looking good. That's like my rule of thumb, really, with studies, but also with, finished illustrations. I keep zoomed right out, 30% or whatever, because I try and work as large as I can. That's always good practice. I say zoomed right out, fill the canvas, make sure I'm liking how it works, and only then will I start to zoom in and focus on the key areas of the piece. You can kind of think about it in terms of like focus, right? If you try and fill the canvas and make sure everything looks good, and then you zoom in and fix the focus areas especially. So if you're doing an illustration, that might be the head. If you're doing a landscape, maybe it's the most interesting part that you think your eye is naturally going to land on, or the foreground. That's very common as well. But in this case, I'm still staying zoomed right out. And it also means that I get kind of cool interplays of textures that I might not have if I zoom in. And by that I mean, when you get all zoomed into the details, you have so much more control over everything that you might miss out on those kind of happy accidents that happen with big silly texture brushes that like I'm using here. I should say the brush set that I'm using here is Greg Rutkowski's brush set. Phenomenal illustrator. I don't actually use his brushes much. I have a couple of them that I have in one of my brush sets that I use for commercial work, but generally I find them like a little too unruly for my workflow. However, again, for this stream, I really like to set myself different challenges and approach things differently, from piece to piece. And for this piece in particular, I was like, it might be cool to really lean into the very textural approach, and I like the result. I did eventually cheat. I think in the second half, I did start bringing in some of my more commonly used brushes, but that's just because it was slowing me down so much. I've been doing this for quite a while, so I'm very comfortable with a specific set of brushes that I've been using for years and refining, but I have my favorites, and switching to a different brush set or a different program or whatever just slows me down like crazy. It's one of the reasons I don't use Procreate or really my iPad at all. It kind of just sits there and is uncharged because I don't particularly like working on drawing tablets where you draw on them on the screen. Does that make sense? What's the word for that? I'm very much a good old classic Wacom lad. I like to be able to sit back and sort of draw expressively like that, rather than having to be, you know, right up in your face. Don't know why I had to do that demonstration. That didn't make any sense. So yeah, I'm very comfortable with a specific tool set that I like, and while I do enjoy adding new brushes to it, and I do enjoy experimenting with different programs, when it comes to commercial work where I really want to be efficient, yeah, I find it difficult to bring in new brushes. So working with Greg's set here was kind of fun, but also after a while I was getting a bit stressed out because I only have 2 hours to try and finish this piece. And it was like, I'd like try and paint into it a bit, and then I'd have to kind of paint over it because I wasn't quite getting the edges I wanted. And it was, I'm doing it here with this hair, like just endlessly repainting these little bits that really are not that important in the grand scheme of things. What I should be doing in the moment is focusing on more important areas, like starting to refine the main features, you know, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, etc. But hey, again, that's why we do this. You know, Study Buddies runs twice a week. We're back to Monday, Friday. And it's funny how quickly you get out of practice if you're not maintaining that consistency. Because I didn't do it for a while. I took a few months off studying, really. And I'm still getting back to it. You know, I think we're like 3 episodes in, or 4 maybe, into the new season. Obviously, it's all made up nonsense, but yeah, we're like 3 or 4 episodes in, and I think I'm starting to get back to where I was before. But yeah, it's not like riding a bike. you really need to maintain your practice with this stuff. One thing I get asked a lot actually during the sessions, so I guess I could answer some of that stuff now since we're doing this for YouTube. One thing I get asked a lot is how to study, or what kinds of studies are valid or valuable. And my approach, not everyone agrees with this, I'll say, but my approach is that basically any kind of art practice is valuable. You know, if you're just starting out, you know, let's say you want to get into art and you're like, how do I learn art? It's like, well, really doing anything is going to be helpful. You know, if you're starting out and you're like, oh, should I copy work? Yeah, copy work. Fuck it, you know. As long as you're not posting it as your own, it's still a valuable exercise. Every kid who grew up painting ever copied the art from their favorite anime or video game. In my case, it was like game manuals, because of course I'm old as fuck. So yeah, game manuals from video game boxes. Hell yeah, the best stuff. Old Zelda art, oh my god, the best. Warcraft 2, yes. So you can just copy stuff when you're new. In terms of like actually studying though, to improve, I would say if you're brand new, start with pencils, keep it simple, and just draw stuff that you see. You know, you can do like a fundamentals course if you find one. My stream has stopped running for some reason. You can do a fundamentals course if you can find one. Control Paint has one. There's a bunch probably on YouTube that you can follow. Proco, I think, has courses and stuff you can do that might be free, which would be great. But what I tend to break it down into are subjects, which each have different usability, usefulness, and then like the type of focus. It's like the subject you're going to use and the focus. What is your focus for each piece? And I'm doing this off the top of the dome, so I apologize if this is a bit rambly, but subjects that are useful to study are going to be figures. So that could be full figures, or it could be portraits, a bit of both. So that's going to be life drawing. There are life drawing classes. If you can find a life drawing class, they're awesome. They're really, really worthwhile going to one of those and learning in person. But also, there's like life drawing stuff you can do online on YouTube and stuff. And usually the way that is structured, if you've never done it before, you might not know. It tends to be you'll have a model to draw, and they'll do different poses in over different time periods. So a very traditional way of doing a life drawing class, let's say it lasts an hour or two, is that the model will do a series of quick poses to start. It could be 10 seconds, it could be 30 seconds, up to a minute, which is very challenging because that's where you have to like learn gesture drawing. It's like, how do you get the entire figure into the drawing within that time? Spoiler is no one's very good at it, but it's like a good way to warm your brain up. And then you'll jump to like a minute, maybe 5 minutes, up to 20 minutes or 15 minutes, and then maybe like a whole hour. And that really just trains you to observe a thing, a person, and try and get them down on the palette, get them down on a piece of paper or whatever as quickly as you can. So life drawing is great. You can do it anywhere. Like I said, you could do a life drawing class, you can draw people in public, you can draw people in a coffee shop. Any of that stuff falls under the life drawing category. Very useful for character artists, but useful for everyone as well. Next up, we've got drawing still life stuff. So I'm sure you're familiar with that. That's when you have objects in front of you and you study them. The reason that's useful, and I feel like this was never taught to me when I was a kid, but the reason still life is so useful is that it starts to teach you about material rendering. So different objects have different materials interact with light differently, and usually in a still life you have several different materials, and maybe you have like a clay pot beside an apple or something, and one of them is like a skin texture essentially, the other is stone. They interact differently with the light, they cast shadows. You can learn a lot from it. So still life stuff I think is one of the most useful types of studies you can actually do, and you can do that anywhere. That's the best thing about it. You can just put a few objects down on the desk and draw it. You, again, go to a coffee shop, do some stuff there. So that's a fantastic thing you can be doing. Next up, of course, you've got architecture. That's going to bring in perspective, which is a useful thing to learn, obviously, if you're new. And you can, of course, do that anywhere. And then finally, I'm sure there's more, but finally you've got plein air work, which is when you go out into nature and draw natural environments. Again, that's very easy to do at home as well. So those are like the sort of main subjects. There's also animals, all these other things, but those are like sort of main subjects that are useful to study. Now, in terms of the way you study, there's a few of those as well. I forgot what word I used for that already. You can do fast, sketchy studies to try and work on your observation skills. So that could be like we were talking with life drawing, that could be going out into nature and doing 1 minute sketches of the environment, 5 minute sketches of the environment with pencil or whatever. On the other hand, you can do very long studies of one of these things, and that could be, again, like I was talking about earlier with the atelier style training, that could be an hour, 5 hours a week. And this is, like, as I mentioned earlier, something that's incredibly important for illustrators and especially to learn, because it teaches you how to finish a render. And that's the biggest issue I see in portfolios when I'm reviewing them. Everyone I know wants to work on Magic or whatever AAA illustration project. The problem is, if you don't know how to actually finish a piece of art to the level that those art directors expect, you'll never get that gig. And I got this wrong for a long time when I was working as a concept artist and I was trying to apply to work on Magic, and I was like, I don't understand why they'll never hire me. They just never. I sent so many applications to them. And it's because I didn't know how to finish a piece of art, and it wasn't until I learned how to do long studies and put extra time into pieces far beyond what I thought that I started getting noticed, for those kind of gigs. A quick rule of thumb that I often teach my students is push your work as far as you possibly can. When you think you're done, stop, go chill, take the night off, and then come back the next day and spend one more day on it. 8 more hours of rendering. Fix all those little things you couldn't be bothered fixing the day before. You can make a list. This is something I actually do for my client work, is I will, as I'm wrapping up the end of a day, I'll make a list of all the things I still need to do that I couldn't be bothered doing in that session. But yeah, that's where the long form studies are really useful. Other kinds of studies you can do, you can focus on values. That means, not painting or drawing color, just black and white, focusing on understanding how values look and how to make that look good. Different materials, of course, paint, charcoal, all these things are valuable to work with. And then the other one thing I wanted to mention for other things you can study are, of course, master studies. So as well as studying people, landscapes, etc., you can also do studies of art, classic, which is basically what we're doing here. We're doing a sculpture study, but it's somebody else's work that you're studying, and that's a good exercise, especially if the medium is the same, for learning how that artist works, which is super, super helpful. So loads of different ways to study is what I'm coming down to. And if you are a new artist, coming up with a schedule to do each of those things in a week would be amazing. This is usually what I advise to students. I'm not doing mentorships right now, but when I do mentorships and I have students come in who are very new, usually the first thing I do is set them up with a study schedule, because it's actually the most valuable thing I can do. Getting them to do like a magic style illustration brief will yield no results because they're too new a lot of the time, and they'll end up getting frustrated, and that's no fun for anyone. So developing a study schedule, which could just be, I don't know, let's say you study 4 days a week for 1 to 3 hours. It depends on your schedule, of course. It could just be the weekend, whatever. But getting that time in and going across all of those subjects is super useful. Anyway, that was a total ramble, I'm sorry. This is the problem with doing VO for long videos. You just kind of end up going off on one. But I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, by the way, please chuck them in the comments. I want to get the comment section kind of moving on my channel a bit, and I love helping artists. That's why I do this stream that you're watching. It's very satisfying for me to read questions and help people out a bit. So back to this study. I noticed that the mouth wasn't working, and I started redrawing it here. I'm still kind of messing it up a bit, but I did fix the nose quite a lot. So this is where I've like finally zoomed in. I mean, I don't know when, it might have been a few minutes ago, but we finally zoomed in, and I'm starting to actually render into it. And I'm keeping the render really just the face. I'm not worrying about anything else right now, especially because I'm running out of time. Again, 2-hour stream. Not a long time to do like a really rendered piece of art. So I'm focusing on the main features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth. And in the next one, when we return to these on this Friday, whatever this Friday is, like I say, I'll be spending 2 more hours. So if you do want to come and watch that live, you absolutely can. It will be 6 p.m. BST on Friday, and again, you can ask me questions live. I can demo things a lot. When I'm cutting these videos down, I have to edit out a lot of that stuff, but like people will ask questions, so I'll give demos live. I really love doing this stuff. But yeah, we're gonna continue with these pieces. And the other part of the stream that is cool is that I get the people who've joined in, if they want to submit their work too, and we get to look at it. So you get to see different people's interpretations of the same art. So yeah, we're really just at this stage going in and starting to redefine the shapes, and start to focus on getting like nice hard edges and soft edges in the right places. My values are a little bit off. I think I do a little soft light layer at the end just to sort of slightly darken the skin in general. But it's looking quite nice. I think I was quite happy where this is going. I haven't done a cast study like this in a long time, and I really enjoy it. Again, I would quite happily spend like 4 more sessions on this. And that's the way, by the way, to when we're talking about long form studies, that's totally the way to do it. Don't sit down for like 8 hours of just studying one thing. I mean, you can, but you'll be tired and you'll probably get sick of it. Coming back to it, spending 2 hours, coming back to it next week, spending 2 hours, back to it next week. It takes ages, yes, but at the end of it, you'll have an insanely polished study. You can put it in your portfolio, in a studies section. That's what I do. I actually, one of the other reasons for even running this stream was for people to have more stuff to post to their social media, because I can't tell you how many times I had conversations with artists in my students who were saying like, oh, I never have anything to post, I'm never happy with my work, so I never really post anything, so I can't, I'm not very good at social media. And it's like, well, yeah, I understand that for sure. But what we need is you to generate stuff to throw onto social media to have conversations with artists and show off your stuff while also improving at your art. Hence, again, this stream. So it's another reason to do these studies, whether in your own time or on the stream. It's just good stuff to post, post it on Kara now. That's the main app we're using at the moment because ArtStation sucks. So it's nice to have a new one that doesn't suck. But you can post on Kara, Twitter. Some of us are still holding on for hope that Twitter will, suck less one day. Blue Sky, whatever you're using. But yeah, it's just good to have extra fodder for your portfolio. Often get asked, should you put sketches in your portfolio to show people or studies? No, definitely not. Like, if you're going to apply for a job, you don't want to be sending them, a study that you did. But it's still useful to have in there somewhere. So if you have like a website, a personal website, which I do recommend, by the way, having like a personal Squarespace or a Behance portfolio or whatever is useful. So that you have like a source that isn't just some paid website that could go down, like ArtStation or one of these. But yeah, having a section on one of those sites for studies can be cool, because actually, as an art director, when I'm looking at portfolios, if let's say you've applied for a job, yes, I'll obviously look at the main portfolio work, but if I'm interested in your stuff and I'm thinking about hiring you, let's say it's an in-house position, I'm not hiring at the moment, but in the past, that's when I'll look at other stuff in your portfolio on your website. So for example, often the advice is just to like only put your stuff you're applying with on your website, and like, yes, keep that front and center, make that really clear. The key things are, have a clear portfolio, ideally small, that's like right there, and an obvious email address as well, so that we can get in contact with you. But you can also put other stuff on the website too. I often use my own website as an example, because I have sections, paulscottkahneman.com, check it out, there's a link below, you can see what I mean. I have mine organized by illustration, with my best samples right there, concept art and art direction with my latest projects right there, and then there's kind of just like other, which has my photography and my sketches, unfinished work and all that kind of stuff. And most art directors won't look at that, but it's cool to have it there for the occasional one who does. If an art director wants to hire you for a position in a company, for example, they might care about the other stuff because they're interested in you as a person at that point, rather than just an asset to work with. Anyway, I think we're getting close to wrapping this one up here. I'm just doing some final sort of balancing around, checking the values for all the parts that I kind of forgot to work on. Again, zooming out a bit so I'm not getting bogged down in detail in those unimportant areas. I'm keeping all the detail to the focal point. But yeah, that wraps it up pretty much. So thank you for watching. I hope that was interesting. If you do have any questions, again, chuck them in the comments. And if you want to see me finish that piece, spend another 2 hours on it, come to the stream on Friday. But I will obviously post it here as well. So yeah, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.